In the middle of the vast expanse of rice fields, where silence seems to be the eternal song of nature, the sun hangs high without mercy, emitting scorching heat to the pores of the earth. The wind only blows occasionally, as if shyly disturbing the tranquility of the fields that stretch green and yellow. However, behind the silence, life is turbulent in a meaningful silence. The farmers are seen, the land fighters who are unknown to history, busy with sweat and determination. Their hands are rough, their skin is dark burnt by the sun, but in their chests there is a spirit that is hotter than the sun itself. The farmers with backs that have been bent by time, harvest the rice one by one, separating the golden grains from the stalks. Every movement of their hands is a prayer, every breath is a hope for a tomorrow that is not always certain. Not far from there, a woman carried a sack full of harvest on her head. Her steps were steady even though the ground was wet and slippery. Her face was covered in dust but her eyes shone with pride. On her shoulders, not only the burden of the harvest, but also the burden of life that she had carried for a long time, the burden of her family, the future of her children, and the promise to her ancestors to continue to preserve the heritage of this land. Meanwhile, on the other side, a farmer was seen looking for grass swiftly, collecting it for animal feed. His hands moved quickly, his body was still fresh but his sweat was already pouring down his back. Maybe he was starting to understand the meaning of this hard work, but he had become part of the circle of life that was passed down from generation to generation, a circle that never stopped even though the seasons changed, even though the world out there changed. But my steps moved, as if pulled by something invisible, towards an old farmer who was clearing his rice field of straw left over from yesterday's harvest. In the midst of a landscape busy with the pulse of life, his figure appeared alone, like a shadow of the past left behind in the midst of a world that continued to move. As if his bones were no longer able to bear the burden of age and memories that aged with time. But his eyes, those eyes still held a small ember, an ember that had not yet been completely extinguished. I knew him, he was my neighbor. There was a time when he was a figure who was never absent from the fields. In the past, his body was strong and his hands agile, even the sun seemed reluctant to challenge him. But now, that body looked frail, every movement seemed to be dragged by the last of his strength. He had just recovered from a long illness, an illness that almost took him from the land he loved more than anything else. But look, even after being struck by illness, he returned to the rice fields. Not to chase the harvest, nor for wealth, but because this was his life. This was where his soul rested. With a sickle that had aged with him, he cut the straw that was stuck hard in the dry ground. His hands trembled, but he did not stop. Every swing of the sickle was proof that determination was stronger than the body, that the spirit could overcome pain. I stood on the edge of his rice field, silent, watching a scene that for others might be simple, but to me it felt like poetry that flowed silently among the rustling of leaves and the whistling of the wind. This land knew his steps. The straw knew who was bowing to face it. Nature seemed to hold its breath, watching a small resistance from a human being against the limits of his own body. And I didn't know whether to feel sad or amazed. Because behind that slow movement, I saw a courage that no time or book could teach, the courage to stand back up, to work again, and to love the land again even though one's own body began to reject it. He kept working, not because of ambition, nor because of chasing something glittering or chasing praise from anyone. He worked because it was a matter of responsibility, responsibility to the land that had given him life, to the rice fields that had been a silent witness to his entire life story, and to himself, who had been one with nature for too long until the boundary between man and earth was almost invisible. This was not work. This was a habit that had become a pulse. For other people, cutting straw, stepping in the mud, wiping sweat under the hot sun might be just a rough routine. But for him, all of that was a prayer that was never spoken in words, only uttered through patient hand movements, through unyielding footsteps, through heavy but continuing breaths. As the sickle in his hand scraped the dry straw, he not only cleared the field of the remains of the harvest, but also erased the remnants of doubt in himself. He knew that his body had not fully recovered. He knew that pain still lurked behind every movement. But more than anything, he knew, quitting was not an option. Because when someone has dedicated his life to something, be it the rice fields, family, or goodness, then work is no longer just an obligation. It becomes the highest form of love that does not say much. People might not understand. They might ask, why is he pushing himself so hard? Why doesn't he just rest? But only he knows the answer. Only he knows that in every drop of sweat he sweats, there is peace. That in every straw he cuts, there is a sense of relief that no amount of rest at home can replace. Because it's not his body that's asking him to return to the fields, it's his soul, which has been tied to this land for more than half his life.